Stop everything you're doing because what I'm about to reveal has the power to shake your deepest convictions. You are about to hear a story so incredible that even science dares not explain it. Imagine a simple man, empowered by a supernatural force, defying the logic of the impossible. He didn't just run against horses, he emerged victorious. This was no ordinary race, but a 25-kilometer run through mountainous terrain in the midst of a raging storm against the fastest horses in the Kingdom of Israel. Consider this, not even today's most elite athletes with cutting-edge technology, intensive training and modern equipment could come close to such a feat. Yet this man, over 3,000 years ago, without running shoes, training strategies, or anything beyond unshakable faith, accomplished the unthinkable. It raises an inevitable question: how far can a human being go when God's hand takes control? Today, you will witness a narrative where the impossible ceases to be fiction and becomes reality. A living proof that when the Creator acts through someone seemingly ordinary, history itself can be transformed before our eyes. Get ready, because this journey will challenge everything you thought you knew about power, endurance, and miracles. The setting of this race was far from peaceful. It was a scene of utter collapse. Israel was engulfed in spiritual and political darkness. King Ahab, under the influence of Jezebel, had turned the nation into fertile ground for idolatry and destruction. Altars to foreign gods were scattered everywhere. Bloody rituals were carried out as if part of the daily routine. And the name of Baal echoed louder than the name of the true God. Evil had infiltrated like a deadly poison, spreading from the royal thrones to the humblest homes. Children grew up witnessing horrifying sacrifices while God's servants hid, fearing for their lives. It was as if a spiritual plague had swallowed the entire nation, leaving only shadows where there had once been light. Priests were corrupt, rulers sold themselves for power, and families were torn between loyalty to the living God or submission to false idols promising immediate pleasure and wealth. Even the identity of the chosen people was being lost in the dust of apostasy, while temples for idols were built using resources that should have honored the Lord of Heaven. The tragedy extended beyond spiritual corruption. The devastating drought, which had lasted for 3 years, scourged every piece of land. Rivers ran dry, crops turned to ashes, and hunger reigned on every corner. Despair had become routine. Mothers watched their children wither, unable to provide food. Farmers abandoned barren fields, desperately seeking a single drop of water to keep their families alive. The economic system collapsed, and the questions echoing throughout the nation were the same. Had God truly abandoned his people? Was this the end of the inheritance promised to Israel's chosen? Yet it is precisely in the darkest scenario that the hand of the Lord moves. When all seemed lost, when the silence of heaven felt like abandonment, the Creator was preparing his response, and he chose to act through someone unlikely, someone with no position of power, but who carried within him the fire of faithfulness. That man was Elijah. He was not an unbeatable soldier or a legendary court hero. He possessed no army, fortune, or political influence. He was just an ordinary man, but with one distinction that made him invincible. His life was entirely in God's hands. Born in a period of darkness, Elijah did not allow himself to be corrupted by the culture of idolatry consuming the nation. His appearance was humble, his origins modest, but his eyes shone with the conviction of the Most High. He became the voice many wished to silence, yet everyone needed to hear. He faced kings without trembling, confronted corruption even knowing the risk of death, and challenged the powerful Jezebel who could destroy lives with a single command. His words were sharp as swords, cutting through lies and exposing the sins of a people who had forgotten the source of their true strength. When Elijah spoke, even palaces trembled, for each sentence carried divine authority. But Elijah's secret was not only in his courage. His strength came from intimacy with the Creator. His heart was a living altar, where prayer was not a formality, but the fuel that ignited miracles. He understood something few men realize. When the ego is set aside and life is placed entirely in God's hands, the impossible becomes routine. Elijah did not speak for himself. He spoke as an instrument of the Lord himself. He was not merely a prophet preaching in the wilderness, but a spiritual storm raised by the Almighty to show that no army, no throne, and no idol could withstand the power of the true God. And this authority was about to be revealed before the entire nation, in a confrontation that would be forever etched in history. On Mount Carmel, the ultimate duel would take place. There, Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal in an unprecedented showdown. 450 men against just one. The rule was simple and deadly. The God who answered with fire would be recognized as the true Lord. The mountain filled with spectators, forming a grand stage, a natural amphitheater where Israel's spiritual destiny would be decided. The air was thick with tension. On one side, hundreds of confident prophets of their pagan religion. On the other, a single man, without sword, without allies, relying only on the faith that the God of Israel would respond. Every gaze was fixed on the scene. The outcome of that confrontation would not only define the faith of a generation, but also forever mark the memory of all humanity. For endless hours, Mount Carmel became the stage for a depressing spectacle. The prophets of Baal shouted relentlessly, danced frantically, and cut themselves with blades in an attempt to catch the attention of their silent God. Their bodies bled, their voices grew hoarse, their eyes desperately searched the sky for any sign of response. But there was nothing, no breeze, no spark, no echo from above. The God who promised power and fertility proved as dead as the cold stones of his altars. The crowd watched in astonishment, witnessing despair spreading like an uncontrollable fire. Meanwhile, Elijah faced them firmly, not with contempt, but with serene certainty that the more the pagan charade failed, the more glorious the manifestation of the true God would be. It was a confrontation, not only of religions, but of truth against falsehood, life against death, light against darkness. Then Elijah took the stage. Unhurried, he walked to the destroyed altar and began rebuilding it with 12 stones, representing each tribe of Israel. He dug a trench around it, placed the wood, positioned the sacrifice, and did the unthinkable. He commanded that water be poured over everything, not once, but 3 times, until the altar was completely soaked and the trench overflowed like a small pond. Those jars of precious water, in a time when the people were dying of thirst due to the drought, seemed like a ridiculous waste. Many began whispering, others laughed, saying Elijah was digging his own defeat. After all, who could light a fire on something soaked to the bone? But Elijah knew a secret that no other man there knew. When God decides to act, not even the laws of nature can resist. The impossible was merely the frame in which the miracle would shine even brighter. Silence fell over the crowd as Elijah knelt before the altar. His prayer was neither long nor theatrical, but carried the essence of pure faith. And then it happened. In seconds, a heavenly fire descended from the sky like a bolt of divine power, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the water, and even the stones of the altar. It was as if the very heavens had torn open to release the flame of the Lord's justice. The heat was suffocating, and the roar made the people instinctively recoil, covering their faces with their hands. There was no longer doubt, no room for questions. This was not a human trick. It was the direct intervention of the Creator. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but the impact would echo through generations. In shock, the crowd fell to their knees, and a single cry filled the mountain. "The Lord is God! The Lord is God!" Tears streamed, hearts were broken, and the truth, which had once seemed lost, was restored in an instant. Elijah was not just a prophet that day. He had become living proof that the God of Israel reigned supreme, but God's revelation was not yet complete. After this display of power, Elijah received the message that would change everyone's life. The 3-year drought would finally end. He approached King Ahab and declared firmly, "Prepare yourself, for I hear the sound of a heavy rain." The sky remained clear, without a single cloud, yet Elijah spoke as one who could already see the invisible. His words carried authority, not because they were his, but because they came from the throne of God. The promise of rain did not only signify restored harvests, but also the spiritual rebirth of a nation that had lost its identity. The same voice that had cried out against idolatry now announced restoration. A new chapter was being written, not by human strength, but by the hand of the Almighty. Atop Mount Carmel, Elijah knelt with his face between his knees, plunging into deep prayer. His servant was sent to the horizon 7 times. Each return brought the same response: nothing. Yet Elijah did not give up. His perseverance was an act of spiritual warfare, for persistent prayer opens doors in the invisible that eyes cannot see. The servant climbed up and down, likely tired, perhaps even doubting, but Elijah stood firm, waging a battle of faith. Then on the 7th time the news came, "There is a small cloud, the size of a man's hand, rising from the sea." To ordinary eyes, it seemed insignificant, but to Elijah, it was the unmistakable sign that the promise was about to be fulfilled. It was the precursor of a miracle in progress, the confirmation that the same God who had sent fire was now preparing the rain. Immediately, Elijah commanded Ahab to prepare his chariot and descend before he was overtaken. The warning was not only practical, it was prophetic. The small cloud would soon become a sky heavy with storm. And so it happened. In moments the horizon darkened, thunder roared, and torrential rain began to fall on the dry land, washing away the dust of despair and bringing life back. It was the rebirth of Israel before everyone's eyes. The promise had been fulfilled with overwhelming force, and once again, God proved that nothing can stop him when he decides to act. The impossible had become reality, and history was being rewritten before all. Then, before the incredulous eyes of soldiers, servants, and onlookers, the impossible began to unfold. On one side, King Ahab, confident in the unparalleled power of his war horses, elite animals bred for victory. On the other, Elijah, a simple man, yet clothed in an invisible strength that came not from muscles or training, but from the very source of eternity. When he took his position to run, the scene seemed absurd. A prophet challenging Israel's fastest horses. Laughter echoed, mockery arose, and no one imagined that at that moment the laws of physics would be torn and rewritten before the entire kingdom. What was about to happen was not merely a race. It was the living revelation that when the supernatural manifests, even the logic of creation must yield. Imagine the scene in cinematic detail. On one side, the gleaming royal chariot pulled by trained horses, snorting furiously, muscles taut, hooves pounding the ground in a perfect rhythm of speed and force. On the other, Elijah, without armor, without adornments, only simple clothes soaked by sweat and the falling rain. While the elite of war represented the pinnacle of human preparation, Elijah was the raw symbol of faith in action. When the starting signal was given, something indescribable took hold of him. His steps were not ordinary. They were firm, light, and rhythmically guided by divine energy. It was as if every fiber of his body had been programmed directly by the Creator for this mission. The ground seemed to cooperate with his feet. Gravity seemed to lose its power over his run. It was not man against horses. It was God against human limits. The path was treacherous, kilometers of mud, sharp stones, slippery slopes, and rain intensifying with every step. Strong riders would have succumbed. War horses were already showing signs of fatigue, yet Elijah ran as if supported by invisible winds. Each raindrop on his skin did not hinder him. It seemed to energize him further. Where anyone else would stumble, he found firmness. Where logic said impossible, the supernatural said continue. Kilometer after kilometer, Elijah did not slow his pace. He overtook the horses effortlessly, as if they were in slow motion. While the animals huffed with exhaustion, the prophet seemed to grow stronger, faster, more connected to the infinite source that propelled him. The crowd witnessing this erupted in shouts, unable to believe that an ordinary man was surpassing war horses. It was living proof that God had taken control of the race. When Elijah arrived in Jezreel before the king, the impact was not only physical, it was spiritual, cultural, and emotional. The people, anxiously waiting at the city gate, fell into absolute silence for a few seconds, unable to comprehend how a man could accomplish such a feat. Then the silence gave way to shouts, tears, and praise. Some fell to their knees, acknowledging the miracle. Others ran to spread the news, but all knew they had witnessed something that would change the history of Israel forever. It was not merely Elijah arriving before the horses. It was God reminding his people that he was still present, active, and sovereign. The race became an eternal symbol, a clear message from heaven. No force on earth can resist the power of the Almighty. For Israel, this feat was more than a spectacle. It was the restoration of faith. After years of drought, suffering, and uncertainty, God showed that miracles were not relics of the past, but present realities. Widows wiped their tears with renewed hope. Orphans felt a future ahead, and families realized their prayers had not been in vain. Elijah's name became a beacon of spiritual authority. His race did not merely challenge horses, it challenged disbelief, destroyed doubts, and raised the banner of radical obedience. It became clear to everyone that when someone aligns with God's will, even the impossible is just the beginning. It was a warning to the king, the false prophets, and the entire nation. God still reigns, and he honors those who honor him. But this story does not end in the past. It carries truths that touch your life today. Elijah's race is not just a memory, it is a spiritual roadmap for facing the impossibilities in your journey. First, it shows that when you connect to God's power, your limits are broken. Mountains that seemed insurmountable become mere details along the path. Second, it teaches that faith is not passivity. It is bold action that moves even before seeing the outcome. Third, it proves that God does not seek the most prepared, but transforms the willing into instruments of miracles. Fourth, it reveals that when you act with heaven's urgency, miracles are not exceptions, they are the natural outcome of obedience. Elijah's race echoes today as a call. Align with divine power and discover that the impossible is not an obstacle, but a stage for God's manifestation. The final message that Elijah's story delivers is like a key that can open a new vision for your life. You do not need to be extraordinary to experience the extraordinary. Elijah was not a superhero with secret abilities. He had no mystical training, and certainly no special resources. What he possessed was accessible to anyone: radical faith and an intimate connection with the Almighty God. This connection transformed him from a simple man into an eternal legend whose example spans millennia and continues to inspire generations. And the good news is that this same connection is available to you today, this very moment as you hear this message. God's extraordinary power is not limited to characters of the past. It is ready to act in the life of anyone who believes. Every obstacle that seems insurmountable in your life is actually a disguised opportunity for divine power to manifest. That financial crisis that seems unsolvable may be the stage where God reveals his supernatural provision. The relationship everyone thinks is lost may become an altar of restoration where heavenly fire reignites love. The illness deemed incurable by doctors may be the perfect scenario for the physician of physicians to show that he still makes the impossible happen. And that dream that seems unattainable, it is merely a mountain awaiting the faith that moves the impossible. Every struggle is a race, every challenge is a track where God wants to show that when he is in front, there are no limits. Elijah ran his race and won because he relied not on his own strength, but on God's power. Now, the question is, are you ready to run yours? No matter how many horses are competing against you, whether debts, fears, insecurities, illnesses, or limitations, when you run propelled by divine strength, defeat does not exist. Every step taken in obedience, every decision guided by God's purpose, transforms your race into an inevitable victory. You do not just participate, you dominate. You do not just arrive, you redefine what is possible. And when the finish line is crossed, your victory will not be yours alone. It will be God glorified through your journey of faith. If this story touched your heart, leave in the comments which part spoke to you the most. Your experience can strengthen the faith of others who are also facing battles. Share this video with someone in need of hope, because your action could be the miracle another life is waiting for. Give a like if you want more content that inspires and challenges you to live in God's supernatural. And subscribe to the channel to receive messages that can change the course of your journey. Activate the notification bell so you won't miss any transformative story that could be the answer you've been seeking. Every interaction from you is fuel that allows us to continue bringing faith, hope, and inspiration to thousands of people. Remember, God's miracles did not remain in the past. They are alive and ready to manifest in the lives of those courageous enough to believe. The same power that made Elijah run faster than horses is available to you today. This story is not just about a prophet, but about what God can do through someone who chooses to trust him. May this message be the spiritual fuel that rekindles your faith and the push you needed to take the next step. The impossible is not a wall, it is merely the perfect stage for divine power to shine in your life.